So how many of you have used TensorFlow before, around 2015? Okay. So you know that it was a little bit complicated to use it. It was, even if it's powerful and using Python, that it's a little bit easy to use, but it was not the case for TensorFlow. So what is TensorFlow before? TensorFlow is an open source library that uses, it's used for machine learning and deep learning. It was developed by Google Brain team in November 2015. And it is the most used library by machine learning engineers and deep learning. So why they are using TensorFlow? Because it uses parallelism and it's distributed execution, and it is powerful and faster. Powerful because it uses C++ as backend, and faster because it uses Python as in the front end. So they are combining the power of using C++ and also the ease of use using Python. And it supports multiple languages like Python, C++, and also JavaScript. And it can be run on desktop and mobile devices. So, Google has released a new release of TensorFlow, which is 2.0. It consists of the ease of use and also the eager execution. The ease of use is focusing on using Keras API high level. So all of us know that many of developers used Keras instead of TensorFlow because Keras is a little bit easy to use. But now TensorFlow used Keras to develop their algorithms and also the eager execution, which means they're not focusing on using graphs and graphs for developing their algorithms. It is robust for model deployments in production for any platform. You can deploy your machine learning algorithms in TensorFlow serving, like the cloud, like Google Cloud, and also TensorFlow Lite to use it in Android or iOS and other embedded systems. And also for web developers, they can use JavaScript to deploy to build and deploy their models, and other language bindings like Java and C and Go. What is also new in TensorFlow is they cleaned up a lot of duplicated endpoints. So the ease of use for model building, it was concentrated on Keras because, as I told you, Keras is easy to use. So TensorFlow just took advantage of this API and included it in TensorFlow directly. So also the TensorFlow implementation contains several enhancements. Like, as I told you, the eager execution is by default. You're not going to use graphs or sessions anymore. So and also to import data, they are using tf.data instead of the QA runners. Just to the QA runners are was used to just put to use the graphs, to build your model to use it in a graph, and then you will not be able to use it before. You have to use a TF session to execute it, which was a little bit complicated. I don't know if you can see this. Here's an example of when you wanted to train a model in TensorFlow 1.x. You have to use a session, and in this session you will use the model fits. But for TensorFlow 2.0, it's easy to use. It's like Keras, if you already used Keras before. So as I told you before, it was complicated to import the data and then to build your model. But now it's easy. You will just use the TF data to import your data and use the TF Keras to build and train your model. And you can run it on distribute it on different processors. Like you can use CPU or GPU or TPU, and you can save your model after to deploy it in the cloud. So for the deployments, we have here the TensorFlow server, which is dedicated for the cloud. And you can also deploy it in your mobile using TensorFlow Lite. Or you can deploy it using TensorFlow JavaScript to deploy it in web pages. Here, an example to use TensorFlow Lite. You can just pick a model or train your model from scratch. And after, you can convert that model to a compressed file. And also, after that, you can use that compressed file, which is called, I think, TF Lights, and deploy it into your mobile or your embedded code. There have been like a lot of API cleanups from TF 1.x. There have been a lot of deprecated functions and endpoints like TF Slim and TF Layer and TF Contrib layers or TF.Keras. They are used for the same purpose. So the Google developers try to remove all the deprecated functions and clean all this mess up. In TensorFlow, the API was unified, and many APIs were removed or just unified, like using one endpoint instead of a lot of endpoints that used for the same purpose. And the good news is that you can still run your TF1.x code with the TF.0, but you will not be able to to use all the advantages that are in TF 2.0. If you want to automatically upgrade your code to TensorFlow 2, you can just use a script which is available in tensorflow.org. You can use it to upgrade your code from 1.x to 2.0. There are some steps to follow. You can convert one script, or you can convert a whole, a folder full of scripts. So Keras now is automatically installed when you install TensorFlow 2.0. There are two ways to install TensorFlow. You can install Keras, and then the TensorFlow is going to be installed in background. But it's safe to install TensorFlow now because it's going to bring Keras with it, and also you will have to, you will be able to use all the advantages that are in Keras in TensorFlow 2.0. And now the documentation is clear than before because there was a lot of complaints about documentation. So to conclude, these are the five new features that that has been used in TensorFlow. As I told you, the execution by default. You will not use the graph and then wait until using the session to execute your model. You will just execute it right away. And Keras as the high-level API now, it's integrated. You will not. It's integrated automatically in TensorFlow. And there's been like API cleanups, as I told you. A lot of endpoints have been removed because they were deprecated or duplicated. And for datasets, you will use, we have the TF datasets to import the datasets instead of the TFQ runners. And also you can still run your TensorFlow code with the new release of TensorFlow. And also if you want to upgrade your code to the new release of TensorFlow, you can use the script that I told you in tensorflow.org. And thank you.
So thank you, guys. I think if you have any questions, you can ask Ibrahim now. We will have a 5-minute session. Later, we have Sarah Lamarche. So I will present later.
How easy to deploy TensorFlow 2? Because I have experienced many issues to make a TensorFlow model exposed as a REST API. It was there was no tool for it. And do you know if we have some tools for that now?
Yeah, I mean, I have an experience in deploying the models. As I told you, I've been using Keras instead of TensorFlow because it's, as I said, it was complicated. That's why I used Keras. But now, since the TensorFlow 2, they are using Keras directly, after you save your model, I used a method to deploy my model using Docker image. And I used also Amazon Web Services to do that using Elastic Beanstalk, if you're already familiar with that. So that's just one example to deploy your model. And also you can here use the JavaScript TensorFlow.js to deploy it in to deploy your API, REST API, in the web development environment.
Hi, I saw that you can deploy your scripts in CPU and GPU and TPU. What does TPU stand for?
It's how can I say? It's in Google. It's yeah, it's TensorFlow processing unit. It's I think it's just for in Google Cloud. Yeah. Yeah.
Which guarantees a higher performance. Any other questions?
why did you use Keras, and isn't TensorFlow alone enough?
As I told you, the problem with TensorFlow was not easy to use. So a lot of developers, they were using Keras instead of TensorFlow, because Keras uses TensorFlow in the back end, and in the front end, you will use just easy Python. Now, Google developers they knew about that, and a lot of people were complaining about it. Even if it's powerful and it's you can distribute your tasks in GPU, as I told you, or TPU, but it wasn't easy to use. After from last year, Google developers, they were trying to make it easy to use. And the first thing that popped in their mind is to use Keras, because Keras was already ready for development. That's why. Yeah. Now, if you install TensorFlow, you will have Keras with it, and you don't have to just use TensorFlow code, and it will use Keras. Because if you are familiar with Keras code, you will be familiar with TensorFlow too, because it's easy.
So we'll take one more question and we can move on to the next speech. Anyone? Okay. So our next, thank you, Brian, for answering these questions.